You won't believe what this HOA Karen did when she saw an American flag on my porch. I mean, of all the things to complain about, right? Hey, friends, today's story is personal, emotional, and honestly, it left me stunned. It all started with a simple act of patriotism. I hung an American flag outside my home, something that means a lot to me, especially because of my background. But instead of minding her business, my neighbor, let's just call her Karen, decided it violated neighborhood aesthetics. Next thing I know, she's threatening fines, calling the HOA board, and even showing up uninvited on my property. What Karen didn't know is that I've served this country, and I now serve justice. In this story, you're going to hear how a quiet act of respect turned into a neighborhood battle, one filled with entitlement, legal twists, and a moment that left everyone speechless. There's drama, there's heart, and there's a lesson about standing your ground when it truly matters. So grab a snack and settle in, because this one's powerful. If you like this story, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have a special story for you. I had just settled into my new home, a quiet little street lined with maple trees and neat lawns. It wasn't much, but after years on the road, moving from base to base, this place felt like peace. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the porch, watching neighbors walk dogs or chat over fences. Life was simple, calm, exactly what I wanted after everything I'd been through. One of the first things I did was hang an American flag on the front of my house. It wasn't just decoration. That flag was a piece of my story, a reminder of the service I gave, the friends I lost, and the values I still held close. I folded it out carefully, securing it to the pole so it would wave proudly every morning. To me, it wasn't just cloth. It was honor, sacrifice, and home. For a while, everything was fine. The flag caught the sunlight just right, and a few neighbors gave a nod or a smile when they passed by. But peace rarely stays quiet in a place like this. One afternoon, I found a letter slipped under my door. It was from the HOA. A complaint had been filed. Someone called my flag distasteful and not in keeping with the neighborhood's aesthetic. I couldn't believe it. Distasteful? It was the American flag. I reread the letter, hoping it was a mistake, but no. There it was in black and white. Someone wanted me to take it down. The thought hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about rules or curb appeal. It was about respect. And apparently someone thought that waving the symbol of our country was unacceptable. I went outside and looked at the flag again. It flapped in the breeze, bright and bold against the clear blue sky. The red, white, and blue felt like a silent challenge now. This small piece of fabric had suddenly become the center of a storm I never asked for. I thought about my years in uniform, the late nights, the sacrifices my family and I had made. This flag was a tribute to all that. And yet, here I was, being told it didn't belong on my own porch. That night, as the streetlights flickered on and the neighborhood settled into silence, I made a choice. This flag wasn't coming down, not without a fight. What I didn't know then was just how personal that fight would get and how far it would take me. A few days after the complaint landed in my mailbox, there was an unexpected knock at the door. When I opened it, standing there with a tight smile and clipboard in hand, was Karen. You know the type, the kind of neighbor who treats every little rule like it's a personal mission to enforce. She carried herself like the HOA was her kingdom, and she was its queen. Karen wasted no time. Without even saying hello, she pulled out a thick stack of printed bylaws and began reciting them like a well-rehearsed script. "The flag you're displaying is against community standards," she said, voice sharp and impatient. "It disrupts the neighborhood aesthetic and has already caused multiple complaints. You need to take it down immediately." Her eyes flicked up to mine, expecting compliance. When I didn't respond right away, she pushed harder. "If you refuse, fines will start accumulating. This isn't a request." There was no warmth, no room for discussion, just cold authority. I looked past her, at the flag still fluttering, proudly on my porch and then back at Karen. It was clear she thought this was about rules, about maintaining order, but to me it was about respect and honor. I could see that didn't matter to her. She turned on her heel, a small, satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, leaving me with the unspoken warning hanging in the air. This is my neighborhood. Play by my rules. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool as Karen's eyes bore into me like a hawk hunting its prey. Karen, I said calmly, this flag isn't just fabric. It represents my service, my sacrifices, and those of countless others. It's a symbol of our country, something I'm proud to display in front of my own home. Her lips curled into a sneer. That's exactly the problem, she shot back. It's political. It stirs up conflict. It's not in harmony with the peaceful look we want for this neighborhood. She waved the papers in her hand like a weapon. Our community standards are clear. This just isn't acceptable. I held my ground. I respect the rules, Karen, but this flag isn't about politics. It's about freedom and honor, values we all share, whether we admit it or not. I'm not taking it down. Her face tightened with frustration. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes, trying to figure out how to break me, but I was done backing down. With a final glare, she spun on her heel. You'll regret this, she hissed over her shoulder as she walked away. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I watched her go, a mix of anger and resolve bubbling inside me. This wasn't just about a flag anymore. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. And I wasn't about to back down. A few days after my tense encounter with Karen, an official-looking envelope arrived in my mailbox. I tore it open, expecting maybe a simple reminder or a polite notice. Instead, my eyes landed on something that made my blood run cold. A violation notice from the HOA, accompanied by a $500 fine. The reason? Unauthorized decoration. In other words, my American flag was suddenly a punishable offense. I sat down, trying to steady my breathing. $500 for a flag that meant everything to me. It felt like more than just money. It was an attack on everything I stood for, but I knew losing my temper wouldn't help. I had to be smart about this. The next hours were spent carefully documenting every detail. The letter, pictures of the flag hanging proudly in my driveway, even notes about my conversation with Karen. I called the HOA board, hoping for clarity, or at least some fairness. Instead, I was met with cold, clipped answers. It was clear Karen's influence ran deep. The board seemed reluctant to question her authority or the fine she had pushed. Still, I refused to back down. This was more than a battle over a flag. It was about respect, justice, and standing firm against bullying. And if the HOA thought I would quietly pay up and give in, they had another thing coming. Determined to fight back, I dove headfirst into the HOA bylaws, reading every line with a fine-tooth comb. What I found wasn't reassuring. The rules around decorations were vague, full of contradictory statements that seemed more like open invitations for someone like Karen to wield power however she pleased. One section said flags were allowed with certain restrictions. Another made a vague nod to maintaining neighborhood harmony. Language so vague it could mean anything. As I dug deeper, I started hearing stories from a few neighbors, cautiously, at first about Karen's history. Apparently, this wasn't her first time bullying people over rules. She'd repeatedly twisted guidelines to suit her own agenda, threatening fines and complaints to get her way. Some families moved away just to escape her relentless grip. But Karen made one critical error. She picked a fight with me. I'm not just any resident. I'm a veteran, yes, but also a sitting judge. This wasn't just about a flag or some petty HOA squabble anymore. This was personal, and I knew how to play this game. I began preparing quietly, knowing the moment would come, when I'd have to stand up not only for myself, but for the principle of fairness. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she hadn't met me yet. And when I moved, it would be with the full force of the law on my side. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. Before this neighborhood, before the quiet streets and perfect lawns, I spent years serving in the military, deployments overseas, long nights on watch carrying the weight of responsibility that few understand. I earned my stripes, faced dangers most people only hear about in stories. After hanging up my uniform, I didn't just walk away. I went back to school, earned my law degree, and eventually became a sitting judge. I've spent my career fighting for justice, fairness, and standing up to bullies disguised as authority. Fakers. So when Karen tried to slap a fine on me for flying my flag, she unknowingly picked a fight with someone who knew how to push back. I didn't rush to anger or threats. Instead, I took a deep breath and leaned on years of training and experience. I started drafting a formal legal counterclaim, outlining exactly how the HOA's actions violated community standards and, more importantly, basic rights. I reached out to a trusted friend from the legal world, someone who knew HOA battles all too well, and we began preparing to challenge the fine and Karen's abuse of power. This wasn't just about a flag anymore. It was about standing up to intimidation, defending freedom, and making sure one person's vendetta didn't trample everyone else's rights. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but she was about to find out that when you mess with the wrong house, you wake the whole neighborhood, and in this case, that house just happened to have a judge inside. The night of the HOA board meeting, I showed up dressed in my judge's robe, not because I wanted to intimidate, but to remind everyone there what was at stake. In my hands were carefully prepared legal documents, and beside me stood a few neighbors who had grown tired of Karen's heavy-handed tactics. The room was thick with tension the moment I walked in. Karen spotted me immediately. Her confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. She had counted on the usual compliance, the quick nods, the easy silencing of dissent. But tonight was different. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts calmly and clearly. I dismantled the violation notice point by point, showing the contradictions in the bylaws and the selective enforcement that had targeted me unfairly. I brought up Karen's history of bullying neighbors, backed by witness statements from those sitting beside me. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their loyalties beginning to shift. Karen tried to interrupt to regain control, but her voice was shaky now. The power she wielded felt fragile under the weight of truth and evidence. As I finished, the room was silent except for murmurs of agreement. One by one, the board members started asking questions, real questions. Questions that Karen couldn't answer without exposing herself further. By the end of the meeting, it was clear. Karen's reign was crumbling, and justice was finally breaking through the noise. I left that room knowing I had made a difference. The fight was far from over, but the first cracks in her armor were undeniable. This neighborhood was about to change, and so was Karen's place in it. Word spread faster than I expected. It started with a few quiet nods of approval from neighbors, then a couple of folks quietly hanging small flags on their porches. Before long, the street was dotted with stars and stripes waving proudly in the breeze. Veterans, first responders, families, all joining in a silent but powerful act of solidarity. Local news caught wind of the story, and suddenly cameras were showing up, lights flashing, microphones pointed my way. It wasn't about me. It was about what the flag represented: freedom, sacrifice, and the right to stand proud in your own home. At a community gathering, I stood before the crowd, my voice steady but full of emotion. I spoke about service, about the friends I lost and the lessons I learned in uniform. I talked about respect, how every flag in that neighborhood symbolized someone's story, their pride, their struggles. And I reminded everyone why this fight mattered, not just to me but to all of us. As I spoke, I noticed eyes welling up, hands gripping flags a little tighter. The room wasn't just hearing words, they were feeling them. This wasn't some petty dispute over HOA rules. It was a moment of connection, a reminder of the freedoms we sometimes take for granted. That day, the neighborhood didn't just stand with me. They stood for something bigger. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hope that respect and honor could win over fear and control. This was more than a flag. It was a symbol of all we fought to protect. The momentum from the community gathering carried straight into the next HOA meeting, and for once the mood had shifted completely. The board was no longer siding with Karen's heavy-handed tactics. Instead, the focus was on fairness, respect, and listening to the voices of the neighbors who'd had enough. When the motion to remove Karen from the HOA Leadership Committee was brought to a vote, it passed overwhelmingly. The room was filled with a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. The woman who had ruled with an iron fist was finally being held accountable. A new motion followed, one that officially allowed patriotic displays like flags, emphasizing the importance of honoring veterans and community members who wanted to express their pride. The board also drafted a formal apology to me and anyone else who had been unfairly targeted. When the news reached Karen, she refused to back down. At the meeting, she stormed out in a huff, unwilling to accept responsibility or admit defeat. But her defiance only made it clearer. Her reign of terror was over. That night, as the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, I felt a quiet sense of victory. This wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming a community and reminding everyone that respect and decency mattered more than control and fear. Karen's chapter here had closed. The spirit she tried to silence was louder than ever. The flag still waved on my porch, now more than ever a symbol of resilience, unity, and the power of standing up for what's right. Standing in my front yard, watching the American flag ripple gently in the breeze, I felt a deep sense of peace. This flag wasn't just fabric hanging from a pole. It was a testament to every moment of courage, every battle fought, and every value I hold dear. It represented more than just me. It symbolized resilience, freedom, and the power of standing, firm with honor. Looking back, I realized how easy it could have been to let fear or frustration take over. But instead, I chose calm and conviction. I stood my ground, not with anger or bitterness, but with respect for the principles that flag embodies. Sometimes the toughest battles aren't won with fists or fury, but with patience, clarity, and quiet strength. The neighborhood has changed too. What once felt like a place where one voice tried to silence many is now a community that understands. Respect means more than rules on paper. It means listening, supporting, and standing together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow on the red, white, and blue, I knew this flag would keep flying, proud, free, and untouchable. It's a reminder that no matter how hard the fight, when you hold on to what's right with dignity, even the most hostile situations can change. And so, with a heart full of hope, I watched the flag dance in the wind, knowing that this story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who believes in freedom and the courage to defend it.